I reconnected with a girl I had broken up with back in school after an incident. When I saw her again, she had a scar on her face. Reconnecting with her, despite that scar, changed my life in ways I never imagined. I'm Mason Moore, 28 years old, and 6 months ago, my fiancée dumped me. We were in the middle of planning our wedding when she called it off. The reason? Scandalous infidelity. But she didn't even consider it infidelity. She claimed, "My love for him is real." During our conversations, she sobbed, asking, "Do you really love me? I don't feel any love from you, Mason." I couldn't bring myself to respond. I thought I loved Camila, but when I found out about her infidelity and our engagement fell apart, I didn't cry. I didn't beg her to stay. I wasn't devastated to the point where I lost my appetite. I had decided to marry her mostly because it felt like the right time, given my age. When she broke up with me, all I said was, "I understand. Please take care of the compensation and the wedding cancellation fee." In response, Camila threw a glass of water at me and yelled, "You're the worst, trash, inhuman." But wasn't I the one who got dumped? I almost said that out loud but held back, knowing it would only make things worse. I've had other relationships, but they all ended the same way. "You don't really love me, do you? Do you even want to be in a relationship?" I've heard that a lot, and I understand now that the problem isn't with them. It's with me. I've never been able to forget my high school love. That love was Nora Anderson. She wasn't stunningly beautiful, but she had big eyes and the cutest dimples when she smiled. She was always cheerful and surrounded by friends, while I was just an ordinary high school guy, not particularly energetic, but not gloomy either. Nora and I got close during a school event where we were assigned to work together. Through our conversations, I found out she, like me, came from a single-parent household. Back then, I was in a rebellious phase and often clashed with my mother, blaming her for our financial struggles. But Nora was different. She deeply cared for her mother and believed that supporting each other was just part of life, even if it was tough. Talking to Nora made me feel childish for being rebellious. As I spent more time with her, my attitude towards my mother softened and the tension between us eased. My resentment and anger faded, and being with Nora made me feel lighter. We were together from the end of our freshman year until our senior year of high school. I thought we'd always be together, maybe even get married someday. But we broke up right before exams. If one of us had found someone else, or if we had simply grown apart, I might have moved on. But there was a reason for our breakup that I just couldn't accept. So maybe that's why I can't forget about Nora, even 10 years later, after becoming a working adult. I heard from a high school friend that Nora had married an elite businessman and was a stay-at-home wife. I was relieved that she was happy, but I remember feeling empty because I was the only one still hung up on Nora. But now, at 28, I can't keep in touch with her, see her, or talk to her. I thought that my unresolved feelings for her would continue to smolder in my heart. It was on an afternoon when the company was closed that things changed. I had spent the whole morning living a lazy life and finally got out of bed in the early afternoon. I took my suit to the dry cleaners, but since it was a weekday, my usual dry cleaner was closed for the day. I had no particular preference for that store, so I visited a different dry cleaner than usual. As I stood in front of the register, I stopped in my tracks when I saw the clerk. Though she was wearing a mask, her eyes and features looked just like my high school sweetheart, Nora, whom I had parted ways with. But surely, after 10 years, I wouldn't expect to randomly bump into her. I assumed that I had only thought it was Nora because I had been reminiscing about our high school days and saw a woman who resembled her. But then I saw Nora's name clearly written on her name tag. Our eyes met, and I was sure. "Nora, is that you?" Nora nodded slightly in response to my question. Even with her mask on, I could see her eyes narrowing as she smiled. "Mason, long time, no see." Her laughter and voice were unmistakably Nora's. My unforgettable first love. But Nora still had the same last name as in high school, and there was no ring on her left hand. However, I knew that suddenly asking, "Did you get divorced?" would be incredibly rude. "Nora, what are you doing here?" "I work here. Dry cleaning. Can I take it?" Realizing I had been staring at Nora while holding onto my suit, I finally handed it over. Nora took the suit and processed it. All the while, she carried the conversation for me, who couldn't say a word. "Nice suit. You must work for a great company. Wow, Mason, you've grown up." "I'm just a regular office worker." "Do you live around here?" "I'm about a 10-minute walk away. I live nearby too." Talking to Nora for the first time in 10 years was a bit nerve-wracking. Though her appearance was that of a mature and beautiful woman, her way of speaking was as bright and lively as during our student days. That's what I had loved about her. I wanted to ask her various things, but unfortunately, another customer arrived. I was just a customer at a dry cleaning place, so I had to leave without getting in Nora's way. Noticing my downcast expression, Nora waved to me and said, "The reunion, you coming?" I wasn't planning to go, but I heard our old teacher is retiring, so I think I should go since he helped me out so much. I immediately jumped at the opportunity. I had initially planned to skip the reunion, but my close friends had insisted that I come this time, so I reluctantly agreed. "I'm going to the reunion too." At the sound of my loud voice, Nora chuckled. "Then let's talk more at that time." I nodded and quickly left the dry cleaner. I had heard that Nora hadn't attended the reunions before, and even this time, the organizer said she would be absent. I had given up on ever seeing her again, but I was overjoyed at the prospect of meeting and talking to her again. The day of the reunion arrived, and Nora came to the venue still wearing a mask. I had thought she might have had a cold when I saw her at the dry cleaner, but I wondered why she was still wearing a mask that day. I was watching Nora from a distance, but she noticed me looking and waved at me. I thought this was my chance to talk to Nora and approached her, but there was someone who spoke to Nora before me, Natalie Jackson, wearing a flashy colored dress. Natalie had always dyed her hair and wore short skirts, even in her student days, and that vibe hadn't changed as an adult. Grinning, Natalie spoke to Nora in an exaggeratedly loud voice. "Nora, what's with that mask? Could that rumor actually be true?" I could hear the sarcasm in her voice. Ever since her school days, Natalie had a nasty habit of speaking ill of others or belittling the popular girl, Nora, in the class. But this time, I was really curious about the rumor Natalie was talking about. The classmates around us were whispering too. Looking at the crowd, Natalie said with satisfaction, "Did you all hear? Nora, she divorced her elite businessman husband. Here she was, enjoying the rich life with her wealthy husband, and now she's been dumped, right?" I was enraged by her spiteful tone. This was not something to talk about in front of everyone. I approached Natalie and spoke up. "Hey, stop it. Don't talk about someone's personal life in front of so many people." Natalie glared at me, seemingly annoyed that I had defended Nora. "What's the big deal? It's the truth. My boyfriend works at the same company as Nora's ex-husband. It seems to be the talk of the office. Apparently, Nora's ex-husband is lamenting. He feels like he paid for defective goods by having such a disappointing wife. If that was true, then her ex-husband was a real jerk too. No matter the reason for the divorce, spreading it around the company and among acquaintances is just wrong. Divorced and broke, living in poverty. What's with that mask? Can't afford makeup." Saying this, Natalie fiercely removed Nora's mask. "Stop it." Nora tried to turn away, but it was too late. Natalie had taken off her mask. But the next moment, silence enveloped the room. Even Natalie, the person who had taken off the mask, was at a loss for words. Looking beneath Nora's mask, there was a large scar running from Nora's cheek to her ear, a thin and long elongated scar like a cut. Whether it was due to time or makeup, The scar had blended in with her skin color, but it couldn't be completely hidden. "What's with that scar? It's disgusting," Natalie murmured. The people around didn't openly raise their voices, but they were clearly disturbed. I couldn't bear it, so I grabbed Nora's hand and took her to the balcony. When we reached the empty balcony, Nora looked at me and said, "Thank you. Honestly, it was uncomfortable being in that room, but I guess everyone would be shocked to see such a scar." Nora said this as she put her mask back on. It didn't suit Nora to say such a thing in a self-deprecating way, and it made me a little sad. "Can I ask about that scar? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Nora then told me about her married life. The man she married became abusive after they were wed. It was a daily occurrence for him to say things that would put Nora down, and it seems that she was constantly being told things that would negate her character. But Nora endured it for years, having only a high school education and being a full-time housewife. She was worried about her financial independence. During this time, her mother's illness worsened, and she collapsed. Though her mother was dependent on her boyfriend and seemed helpless when Nora was in high school, Nora's mother had turned her life around after becoming ill. She had worked hard, and together they supported each other. But even after being hospitalized, her condition didn't improve, and she passed away. "I'm sorry for all the trouble until now, but I want you to be happy." Those were Nora's mother's last words. Hearing them, Nora decided to divorce, for her mother's wish for her happiness gave her the push she needed. The scar was inflicted by her husband when she brought up the divorce. Thinking about all of Nora's hardships made me incredibly sad. But seeing me like that, Nora lightly tapped my back. "Don't look so down. I'm happy to be free now that I'm divorced, just like Mom wanted. I'm looking for happiness. I don't have the courage yet, but I have a goal to someday take off this mask and walk proudly." Seeing that intense look in Nora's eyes, I remembered the time we parted ways in high school. Nora's mom was the type who depended on her boyfriend. Nora always came second to her, and she often ended up giving her money to men. But Nora managed her mother's earnings and even worked part-time jobs, trying hard to save up for college application fees. However, just before the exam, she found out that her mother had spent the money meant for the exams. At about the same time, her mother's illness was discovered, and Nora's mom was dumped by the boyfriend she had been financially supporting. Despite having such a terrible mother, Nora said she would give up on her exams and work to support her mother. Of course, I was totally against it. "That mother of yours is awful. Just leave her." I remember saying that. I thought she should just leave her mother, live alone, save some money, and go to college, even if she had to take out student loans. But Nora didn't abandon her mother. "She's my only family," she said. I understood how Nora felt, but I just couldn't agree with her. Looking back, I realized how childish I was. I was so dazzled by Nora's efforts to support her family and felt so inferior because I couldn't do anything that Nora and I grew apart, and we eventually broke up. As my high school memories faded, the 28-year-old Nora in front of me took off her mask. A scar was revealed under the mask. Under the mask, it's quite something, isn't it? I looked back into Nora's eyes firmly. "Yeah, but this here is even more amazing," I said, pointing to Nora's heart. "You're still as strong as you were in school, if not stronger. You've supported your family, found the courage to escape from violence, and you're still looking forward, even though you've been hurt." Nora smiled, looking a little shy at my words. "Thank you, but you're the same, aren't you, Mason?" I didn't understand what Nora meant, so I waited for her next words. "You were kind even back in school, Mason. Remember when you defended me from my friends when they teased me about my mom? And just now, you were the only one to take me away when people were talking about my scar. You have always been kind, Mason." It was the first time I realized that there was kindness in me. I had thought of myself as an indecisive guy who was neither serious about work nor love. I never even considered that I could be kind to others. I remember when we were dating in school. Nora continued, we used to hold hands a lot. Do you remember? Of course I remembered. Nora and I used to share our anxieties and little joys and happiness by holding hands. I gently held Nora's hand. Her hand was just as small and white as it had been 10 years ago. I almost cried at the warmth I felt after 10 years, but I held back. I told Nora about my current situation, holding her hand, that I couldn't get serious about love or work, that I was living without any goals. That's why my engagement was called off. I wasn't looking for advice or comfort. I just wanted Nora to listen. I wanted her to know who I am now, even if it meant only exposing my pathetic self. After listening, Nora smiled a little. You're still careless when it comes to yourself. Let me, your first girlfriend, tell you something good. I nodded, enchanted by Nora's smile. You, Mason, can work harder and have more fun when you think of others rather than yourself. So how about trying hard for me from now on? I thought I'd like to be together with you again after our reunion, Mason. What do you think? We had somehow understood each other's feelings since we held hands. I love you, Nora. I've loved you all these 10 years. Nora blushed at my confession. Then work hard to be with me. Will you love me seriously? As for work, I want you, Mason, to be devoted to a job you're passionate about. Living a self-indulgent life is a waste. Let's think about our future so that we can live our lives laughing together. I nodded at those words. From now on, my life won't be alone, and just thinking that made me feel somehow optimistic. From that day, Nora and I started dating again. The first thing we did was job hunting. I had been aimlessly doing a job I didn't want to do, and at work, there was my former fiancé. I didn't really care and continued working as I was, but I wanted to make a break from the unmotivated days and life I had been living. Although the salary was a bit lower at my new job, I found a sense of purpose. Since starting dating with Nora, my private life also became fulfilling. Before, on my days off, I used to shut myself in without even opening the curtains, but I began to go out more by accompanying Nora in her hobby of hiking. I even gained a little muscle and became interested in healthy eating. 2 years after we started dating, Nora and I got married, and now we have a child and live together as a family of 3. Nora's facial scars have faded, and she's not wearing a mask now. Her emotional scars have healed, and she's enjoying raising our child. Recently, I received a report from Nora that she's pregnant with our second child. I want to make a lively and fun family, don't I? Looking at Nora's smiling face, I naturally smiled too. She keeps bringing me happiness one after another, but I don't just want to be happy. I want to be someone who can make her happy too. Before I reunited with Nora, I couldn't imagine such happy days. Our reunion changed my life. I want to cherish the happy times with my family without forgetting my gratitude to her. How was today's story? Your channel subscription and hitting the like button will be an encouragement for our creative activities. We look forward to receiving comments from you. See you in the next video. Do I know you from somewhere? The moment the beautiful CEO Patricia Brown saw my face during a meeting with my boss, Mila Johnson, a glimmer of recognition seemed to flash across her eyes. Mila, standing before me with a forced grin, dismissively labeled me as just an incompetent rookie in a mocking tone. After the meeting concluded, while Mila lavished Patricia with praise, I quietly began tidying up. "I've been searching for you," Patricia said, ignoring Mila's presence. She approached me and grasped my hand. "Madam CEO, what do you mean you were seeking out this supposedly incompetent individual?" Mila was visibly stunned, while Patricia gazed at me with tears brimming in her eyes. Little did we know, this moment would drastically alter the fate of Mila, who had always looked down on others. My name is Edward. I work at Williams Trading Company, and I'm 53 years old. Although I joined this company just 2 years ago, I've had diverse professional experiences before. In a word, my life has been tumultuous. My father was a capable businessman who traveled the globe. My mother and I lived in various countries due to my father's work. Thanks to this, I've become fluent in around 5 languages, starting with English. In my teenage years, my mother grew weary of the constant travel and decided to part ways with my father. My father, who had independently mastered English after the war, firmly believed that with diligence and resolve, anything was possible. This led him to wonder why my mother, who had become more reclusive and homebound, did not socialize more. He even asked me directly, "Why doesn't your mom go out and meet people?" with genuine perplexity. Whether it was due to my inheriting my father's traits or my ability to adapt easily to new environments, I had no complaints about living with him. However, when I compared his seemingly content solitude to my mother's daily tears, I decided to return to the U.S. with her. My father appeared slightly saddened by this, but promptly returned to his work. It was a time of economic prosperity, and Japanese businessmen were ubiquitous. Even without much effort, work was comfortable and incredibly exciting for my father. And so, I departed for the U.S. with my mother. My father provided substantial alimony and child support, ensuring there would be no concerns regarding my educational expenses. However, my uncle, who had invested in real estate, persuaded my mother to join him in this venture. And that's when our troubles began. At first, the investments were profitable, and my family enjoyed a prosperous period. But when I was preparing for college entrance exams, the economic bubble burst. My uncle, being an inexperienced investor, quickly found himself in insurmountable debt. He had been entrusted with my college funds, leaving us destitute and forcing us out of our home. I managed to graduate high school, but struggled to find a suitable job, so I resorted to taking on part-time work. My mother, once again, retreated into seclusion and eventually became bedridden. She was severely depressed, although mental health issues were not widely recognized at the time. She lost her appetite, grew thin, and ultimately succumbed to a common cold. This occurred shortly after my 20th birthday. My uncle disappeared, and his family severed all ties with us. I was left alone, but my father's resilience helped me avoid succumbing to excessive pessimism. Fortunately, I was able to forego inheriting my mother's debts by waiving the inheritance. Here is a paraphrased version of the given text. I've had a diverse work history, dabbling in various industries like food service, construction, and manufacturing. I even taught myself programming and became a software engineer, but none of these jobs ever truly resonated with me or felt like a long-term fit. As I approached my 50th birthday, I knew it was time to make a change. That's when a friend introduced me to Williams Trading Company, a mid-sized yet stable organization where the work aligns well with my skills and interests. The employees have been welcoming, and despite being new to sales, they've taken me under their wing and shared their knowledge. There is, however, one aspect that poses a challenge. My boss, Mela Johnson, the sales department manager. Her brash tone often catches me off guard as I hear her sharp voice summon me to her desk. "Yes," I reply hurriedly, making my way to her. Mila's voice booms, "You're late. I always say, when I call, you come within 3 seconds." As expected, an old beginner has sluggish reactions. Impatiently tapping her desk, Mela glares in my direction. "I'm very sorry," I say, bowing deeply. I knew from experience that without this gesture, she would yell at me even more. "Okay, fine, just be more careful next time. Now, have you prepared the materials for the meeting next week?" "What? I was told the deadline was the day after tomorrow, wasn't it?" "Who told you that?" she snaps. "You did, Miss Johnson." I start, but before I can finish, a thick stack of papers is slammed onto the desk. "Who said that?" "I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood," she retorts. "Isn't that right? Be grateful I corrected your misunderstanding. Are your old ears failing you? Hey, why are you just standing there? Hurry up and get the materials ready. Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I respond politely and turn to go back to my desk. Again, I think to myself, since the day I was assigned here, Mila has singled me out, finding faults and going back on her words just to attack me. Why is this happening? Is it because I'm a 50-year-old beginner? My coworker next to me gave me a compassionate expression. Our gazes locked, and we exchanged wry grins, yet we remained silent. Once, when a colleague attempted to assist me by offering extra resources, Mila witnessed it and harshly reprimanded me. Naturally, I was the one who faced the consequences. Apparently, I was not supposed to bother my busy colleagues. Since then, everyone realized that showing kindness towards me in Mila's presence would lead to even worse treatment, so they refrained from speaking up openly. However, they would discreetly lend me a hand when Mila was not around. That's why I can't quit, I thought to myself. Besides, I don't dislike the sales work. I'm truly my father's son, I mused, feeling somewhat amused. Still, what should I do about Mila's attitude? As I hastily prepared the materials, I thought, I suppose I'll have to work at least 2 days ahead of any deadline, not trusting the given dates. I'll strive to stay on top of my tasks. Edward, what about those materials? Here it is, Edward, the estimate for the upcoming project. It's all done. I've also secured approval from the manufacturing division. My strategy was working, and even Mila couldn't find fault with it. My coworkers were impressed, saying, Edward, you're exceptional. I thought I could finally unwind, but I soon realized how mistaken that assumption was. At first, Mila seemed taken aback and would respond with phrases like, oh, okay, or well, that's fine. However, she quickly started becoming irritated. It seemed that not being able to vent her frustrations on me was only increasing her stress. Edward. Her voice was already laced with rage when she called out to me. Yes, what is the matter? You know, she'd had summoned me, but she didn't seem to have any criticism to voice. I mentally reviewed my tasks, trying to identify anything she could potentially fault. Nothing. I was safe. I told myself not to cower in front of Mila and stood before her with a serious expression. Mila glared at me, her body trembling with anger. She was probably searching for a reason to blame me. After staring at me for a while, her face suddenly brightened, as if she had just thought of something. Edward, that plant over there is wilting. Have you been watering it? You haven't, have you? This is negligence. The supervisor, Miss Johnson, suddenly shifted the blame onto me, even though the issue had nothing to do with my work duties. I gently explained, Miss Johnson, that plant belongs to you, and I was instructed not to touch it. However, my response only fueled her outrage. She scolded me, asserting that as the newest team member, I should be responsible for the plant's care, implying that a younger manager's plant should not be allowed to die. As she slammed the documents on the desk, her anger seemed more intense than usual, perhaps because she had not found a reason to express it lately. Breathing heavily, Mila concluded with an oddly satisfied expression. Regardless, you may be experienced, but you're new to this department. You need to be attentive to everything and not annoy me. I understood her fervent request. Regardless of my efforts or lack thereof, it made no difference to Mila. She was merely venting her own anxieties upon me. Unbelievable. At this rate, she'll find fault even with the spotless windows. I sighed as I returned to my desk, noticing my coworkers observing us with tense expressions. Even the kindest individuals must suspect a reason behind Miss Johnson's targeted treatment of me. I felt utterly dejected, yet deep within, my resolve began to grow. Very well, if that's how it must be, I'll prove my worth through my work. I started working even more diligently than before. I studied our products thoroughly, visited the factory, and gathered data about their strengths. I incorporated this knowledge into my presentations and pitched to clients. The outcomes were positive, and I secured several contracts. Excellent. If I keep demonstrating my capabilities, even Miss Johnson will have to acknowledge me. And age is irrelevant. So I continued achieving results. Of course, as Mila instructed, I also tended to the plants. It seemed that Mila's attitude towards me was gradually improving. Johnson couldn't criticize the situation. Additionally, her annoyed demeanor had softened recently. At last, my hard work is yielding results, I began to think. However, Mila still had no plans to welcome me as a co-worker. I understood this just a fortnight later. Edward, come over here for a bit. Mila addressed me, surprisingly upbeat. Of course, what's the matter? I promptly made my way to her desk. The company we're set to sign a new deal with is highly significant. I'm the one assigned to go, but Edward, you'll be joining me. I couldn't believe it when she asked me to accompany her to meet such an important client. Yes, you've been doing well with some smaller deals recently. This is a great chance for you to learn from a big project. I'll be the main contact, so you can just observe and learn from me, Mila said, surprisingly making a lot of sense. I was too stunned to respond at first. What? Do you have a problem? She glared at me, some things never changing. I'm honored. Thank you for the opportunity, I managed to say. My pleasure, Mila replied, her grin a bit unsettling. But I was too excited about the new project to worry about it. Mila introduced herself with practiced ease. Nice to meet you. I'm Mila Johnson, sales manager at Williams Trading, handing her card to the CEO, Patricia Brown, of Castle Mountain. Thank you. And who is this? Patricia said, looking at me. I was overwhelmed by her stunning beauty as we met for the first time. I'm Edward, I stammered, quickly handing over my own business card. Here's a paraphrased version of the given text. As I presented my company's offerings, Patricia examined my ID card, then peered curiously at my face. Forgive me, but have we crossed paths before? She murmured, as if trying to recall a past encounter. Before I could respond, Mila interjected dismissively. He's just a rookie, nothing more. Then, addressing Patricia directly, she said in a mocking tone, Miss Brown, we're truly grateful that you've chosen to work with our company once again. I knew that Patricia had founded Castle Mountain, a rapidly growing business specializing in beauty products for women. Their interest in the items handled by Williams Trading had led to this potential partnership. Not at all, the pleasure is ours, Patricia replied warmly. It's an honor to have our sales manager herself, accompanied by an experienced staff member, visit us today. I'm confident you'll be able to address any questions or requests we may have. Compared to the poised and elegant Patricia, the tall and sharp-featured Mila struck me as undeniably beautiful, but in a more abrasive manner. I had witnessed Mila pound on her desk, shouting profanities while wielding thick documents, a far cry from Patricia's refined demeanor. All right then, Edward, go ahead and explain, Mila said casually, catching me off guard. Huh. Isn't it your job to handle the main negotiations, Miss Johnson? I couldn't help but question her. I was sure she had asked me to simply observe and learn. What are you talking about? You insisted on doing it, so I entrusted it to you. Surely you came prepared, didn't you? She looked at me with a puzzled and disbelieving expression. Ah, I see now. I was set up. In that moment, the realization hit me. Instead of tormenting me at the office, she had now chosen to humiliate me in front of a client, risking the deal. What was she thinking? Her eyes gleamed with a mischievous intent. Seeing that, I understood why she had been so quiet lately. She was planning this trap. The glint in her eyes as she watched my bewildered face showed her delight. But I won't succumb to her scheme. I steeled my nerves. Understood, Miss Brown. Please take a look at these documents, I said, taking out the contract materials from my briefcase and handing them to Patricia. Then, I began my explanation. Hold on a minute, Miss Johnson. Handing the paperwork to Mila, I saw her eyes widen in surprise. Undeterred, I pressed on with my detailed account. Patricia observed quietly, allowing me to complete my explanation without interruption. Once finished, I inquired, "Patricia, do you have any queries?" "Certainly, your presentation was clear. I'll compile my questions and send them to you via email. Please address those when you can." We firmly shook hands, signaling the successful conclusion of our discussion. Mela, her expression one of bewilderment, asked, "Does this mean?" "The contract will proceed as planned, with Edward leading the way." I heard Mila grinding her teeth beside me, but I immediately accepted the role without hesitation. Mela could no longer contain her voice. "What? Edward, you?" However, Patricia's calm voice cut through the tension. "By the way." Both Mela and I turned to Patricia, who revealed, "I've been looking for you, brother." I couldn't help but cry out in surprise. "What? Brother?" Mila seemed equally shocked. Patricia explained, "Yes, brother. I'm your half-sister, Patricia Brown." My father, James Smith, often spoke of his son, Edward, whom he assumed had taken his mother's maiden name, Edward. She approached me with a smile, noting the resemblance in our demeanor and expressions during business meetings. I was taken aback by Patricia's revelation, but her account sounded credible. After all, she had no reason to be dishonest with me as we worked to finalize a business agreement. Her words evoked vivid recollections of my father, stirring emotions within me. I'm surprised, yet I'm grateful for this information. I've been on my own since my mother's passing. Unfortunately, I lost contact with my father, and he passed away 3 years ago. Patricia nodded solemnly. "Yes, your father was a remarkable individual, and I cherished him. He was always concerned about your well-being. After the economic downturn, he came to the United States once in search of you, but your mother's family had dispersed, and he couldn't locate you. I felt a sense of joy upon realizing that my father had indeed made efforts to find me, even though he had seemingly forgotten about me." As Patricia and I continued our conversation, Mila, who had been overlooked, interjected with an irritated tone, requesting that I sign the contract. Without hesitation, I agreed, and Patricia swiftly signed the documents, attempting to hand them to me. However, Mila swiftly snatched the papers away, declaring that it was time for us to leave. Ignoring the puzzled expressions of Patricia and myself, Mila hurriedly departed, with me following behind. As we returned to the office, Mila suddenly turned to face me, her expression resembling a terrifying demonic mask. In a strained, low voice, she expressed her desire to have a serious discussion, questioning why the materials I had prepared for Castle Mountain differed from the ones she had instructed me to create, as they contained more detailed information than she had requested. "When I received the hasty note from you, Mela, instructing me to create materials based on its contents, I did so. However, I felt the resulting materials might not adequately convey our products to the client. So, I put together additional information I believed the client would find useful and prepared my own set of materials, keeping them in my bag as a supplement in case your explanation fell short. Since you told me to explain, but didn't provide the materials you intended to use, I had no choice but to rely on my own," I explained. "Are you saying this is my fault?" Mela exclaimed, clearly displeased with my response. "Ultimately, the client understood the materials well, so it's not a problem, is it?" "Yes, and this Patricia Brown business, is she your sister?" "Long lost." It was quite the emotional display. "There seems to be quite an age gap between you two. Your father must have been quite the active older man." How distasteful. Mila's mocking words struck a nerve. I could accept her comments about me, but I wouldn't tolerate her speaking ill of my parents. "Miss Johnson, that remark was inappropriate and a violation of company compliance." "Excuse me, are you upset?" Mela asked, pushing my shoulder firmly. The force caused me to stumble a bit. Stumbling from a woman's push. "You must be getting old," she scoffed. Your arrogant colleague said you'd be the lead, but you should decline. Tell her I should be the one in charge instead. My stumbling has nothing to do with my role at Castle Mountain. I have no plans to step down from the position I was assigned, I insisted. Our heated exchange drew the attention of the lobby's occupants, but we were too engrossed in the argument to notice. Suddenly, a booming voice interrupted us. Enough. Both of you, stop this right now. It was John Williams, the president of Williams Trading, standing with a stern expression. Mr. President, Mila gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Look around. Everyone heard your dispute. Now, come to my office. We'll continue this there, he commanded with undeniable authority, and Mila and I followed. Yes, I apologize, I said sincerely. Good. And you, Miss Johnson? Reluctantly, Mila and I followed the supervisor to the president's office, a place we seldom visited. Justify your actions, Mr. Williams commanded as soon as we stepped inside. Eager to understand Mila's perspective, I chose to remain silent, but I instantly regretted my decision, for her explanation was nothing but a flagrant falsehood. She accused me of neglecting my responsibilities and mistreating my junior coworkers, claiming she had repeatedly tried to steer me in the right direction. But I had failed to make any progress, so she had brought me to the Castle Mountain meeting to demonstrate proper job performance. Instead, I disregarded my responsibilities and chatted with a relative, then secured the position through my personal connections. According to her, I should have declined the offer, but I shamelessly accepted it, displaying a complete lack of professionalism. She argued that someone as old and dishonorable as me deserves termination, and should be replaced with younger, more compliant employees. That's her account. Do you have any counter-arguments, Edward? Mr. Williams looked at me, his eyes cold as he glanced at Mila, who was panting after her tirade. Yes, I have numerous counter-arguments, I said, and then I systematically refuted Mila's accusations. I explained that I never neglected my duties or dominated my colleagues. I added that my coworkers could verify this. I mentioned that Mila's constant harassment and tantrums had been unbearable, and that I kept records and occasionally recorded her behavior on my phone. I provided that as evidence later. Regarding today's meeting, Miss Johnson only instructed me to observe and learn, but suddenly, without giving me any materials, she told me to present to the client. It was clearly an attempt to humiliate me. The client chose me over Miss Johnson for the crucial deal because they recognized my ability to keep business and personal matters separate. When Miss Johnson suggested I prioritized personal affairs, I explained that while I had recently discovered the CEO of Castle Mountain as my half-sibling, this was only discussed after the business was completed, and the client understood the distinction. I disclosed everything to the president, despite Mila's attempts to interrupt. Though the president seemed troubled by the revelation, he left the room to ponder it. Afterward, Mila warned me that I had overshared, reminding me to be discreet, mindful of the surveillance cameras in the office. I apologize for the delay, said Mr. Williams after a moment, his expression now visibly frustrated. I just spoke with Miss Brown from Castle Mountain. Her account aligns exactly with what Mr. Edward reported. That's because she's his sister. She's obviously trying to cover for him. Mila turned pale and nearly shouted. I simply asked her about the meeting, without sharing your version or Mr. Edward's. So, Patricia had indeed told the truth. Of course she had. Even if she weren't his sister, she wouldn't lie to protect Mila. What made her think she could get away with this? Miss Johnson, you've made a serious mistake. You attempted to sabotage an important meeting by humiliating Mr. Edward in front of a client. What would you have done if we lost the contract? Blame him and hope it wouldn't be discovered? Furthermore, your daily conduct is a major concern. We will investigate this matter. Until your punishment is determined, you are to stay home. This is unjust. You're going to keep this useless old man who bounces from job to job and get rid of me, someone valuable. What are you talking about? Mr. Edward is not useless. The individual we're discussing has demonstrated remarkable versatility, excelling in diverse fields. It's an honor to have them on our team, and their achievements in sales are noteworthy. They possess a multifaceted talent, not a lack of focus. Mila's eyes widened as she listened to Mr. Williams's commendation. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I scratched my head. I'm flattered to be described as versatile, but I simply pursued my passions and explored different roles. Nonetheless, I've always given my utmost in every position. This dedicated approach has undoubtedly shaped their impressive career trajectory. I once had the opportunity to speak with the CEO of the IT company they previously worked for. They were amazed that the individual had created a system that is still in use and making a significant impact, given that they were self-taught in that domain. Absolutely, I made it so that anyone could use it, not just me. This way, everyone can grasp the system easily. Ms. Johnson, you pride yourself on your talents, but what if you were suddenly gone? Mila was taken aback by the sudden question, but responded defiantly. Of course, everyone would be in trouble because no one can replace me. That's the problem. I believe it's crucial to ensure everything runs smoothly even if I'm not around tomorrow. This benefits my colleagues, our clients, and the company as a whole. Thinking that no one can replace you is merely self-satisfaction. Self-satisfaction. Mila was about to raise her voice again, but she noticed Mr. Williams's sharp gaze and fell silent. Yes, until you understand that, you won't change, I said, and she looked down, frustrated. That's right. I also need to ensure my absence wouldn't disrupt the company. Now I understand why none of your previous employers had anything bad to say about you, Mr. Williams murmured thoughtfully. Despite being a manager, you only think of yourself. It's truly disappointing, and I share some blame for not seeing this earlier, he added with a wry smile. As Mr. You seem to lack the skills needed to lead effectively. It appears you're unable to see the potential in your team members. Mila was overwhelmed and broke down at her desk, weeping. Tears won't solve this. Take the rest of the day off, and don't return until you receive further instructions. Mila was still required to leave. Reluctantly, she stood up and departed, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a deflated one. Well, Edward, it's been quite an eventful day for you. Yes, I'm grateful you didn't just take Miss Johnson's words at face value and also heard my side of the story. So, do I have your approval to take on the role of president? Absolutely. We shook hands firmly, sealing the agreement. I hope you remain with our company for a long time. I find my work here very fulfilling, and I hope to stay as long as possible. That's wonderful to hear. I look forward to our continued collaboration. A thorough investigation into Mila's conduct was carried out, exposing her mistreatment of me and similar attitudes towards other mid-career employees. It became evident that she harbored a strong aversion towards individuals with diverse work histories. Ultimately, due to her compliance breaches and actions at Castle Mountain that could have severely jeopardized the company, Mila was dismissed. Now, with a long and challenging path ahead of her, she would have to do the very thing she despised, seek a new job. I wondered if that hysterical and arrogant Mila could adapt to a new work environment. I heard through the grapevine that she found a new job, but soon encountered troubles and resigned. She repeated this pattern, causing issues and leaving each new position. Eventually, she could not secure full-time employment and had to settle for part-time roles. A colleague informed me that they witnessed her working and overheard younger coworkers making comments like, "That old woman is useless." But they could not bring themselves to greet her. "Brother, over here. This way." Since then, Patricia and I have maintained a connection outside of the workplace. She has become the family I had been missing for a long time. Today, she brought me to visit our father's grave. It's been a long time, nearly 3 decades, since that fateful day. As I stand before this modest grave, I join my hands in a respectful gesture, conveying my heartfelt greetings to the one who rests beneath. Eventually, I followed in your footsteps and became a salesman. While I may not be exploring the globe, I find fulfillment in my work. I'm doing all right, so you needn't fret. And I'm grateful that you introduced me to Patricia. As I concluded my prayer and rose to my feet, Patricia studied my expression. What were you discussing? It's a private matter. A talk between us fellows. Sharing a laugh, we strode into the sunlight, our gaze fixed ahead.